Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever and whenever this finds you. This is your June 2020 Starbase 118 podcast. Hello and welcome back to a very special edition. It is award season, ladies and gentlemen of the fleet, and it is an exciting time. We are going to go through some of our predictions for the upcoming 2020 Fleet Awards, which I know everyone is very excited about. There's a huge amount of buzz on the forums and on Discord about it, and people are really getting excited about some of the cool outfits people have come up with for their avatars, nominating their friends for awards they think they are deserving of because of everything they've done for the fleet, and them themselves receiving these wonderful testimonials from their friends and colleagues about everything that they've done in the year that's just gone past. But before we get to that, we have got an absolutely packed show for you folks. Packed solid with quality Starbase 118 content. I'm talking about, we're going to have Laser Focus with Laz, his continuing series of The Science of Space. We are going to have a Wiki Roundtable discussion with several members of the Wiki team. We're going to talk us through some of the details of maintaining the fleet's absolutely vital archive resource of everything that we've built up about our universe. We've got weather reports, we've got advertisements, and in a moment, we're going to have announcements from our favorite friend, Sheila Bailey. Stick around for the rest of the big show, and you're going to see sim reads of the winner and runner-up of this year's 2020 Writing Challenge. We also have a red carpet award ceremony where we're going to talk through some of the fantastic fashions that people have brought out this year to show off their avatar and style. So without further ado, we're going to give you some announcements from around the fleet, a little update on some of our new and returning members, and then we'll kick off the fun. Thanks again for joining us at the Starbase 118 podcast. We are happy to have you here. Here's Sheila Bailey.
Announcements. Hi all, I'm Lieutenant JG Sheila Bailey, and these are your general announcements for the June 2020/2397 podcast. First off, we'll start with Jalon Rajel promoted to Commodore. Early this month, the fleet celebrated the promotion of Jalon Rajel to Commodore after 5 years of serving as the commanding officer of the USS Constitution. Additionally, she has the honor of being only the second 118 fleet member to achieve this rank. For more information and to offer your congratulations, please visit the thread titled Jalon Rajel promoted to Commodore in the general discussion on the forums. Ship logos. In honor of our 26th year, the Image Collective rolled out some fantastic new ship logos to update our fleet's look. A big hand to Joe Marshall and Alice for their hard work on those fantastic images. For more details, read the article Eye-Popping New Ship Logos Bring a Smart Look for Community's 26th Anniversary in Community News on the forums. Changes to the forums. As some of you may or may not have noticed, there have been some changes to our forums. Chief among them is the addition of the featured forum and the transition away from ship forums and threads. Ship threads have been merged with other areas of the forum or retired to encourage more discussion in ship channels on Discord. Award ceremony results. Award nominations are closed, and the fleet staff have received your nominations and compiled a list of winners. The ceremony will run from June 27th through June 30th, and the list of winners will be posted in the awards ceremony thread in the Hall of Honor on the forums. Award ceremony nominations. Got a nomination but the award season has wrapped up? No problem! You can now use the forum to submit nominations all year round. Be advised, Award ceremony deadlines do still apply. For more information, check out the community news article. Award nominations will now be open all year. And last but not least, fleet-wide chat. Join us in the Discord chat for our July OOC chat. The official date and time will be announced soon in the community news. Once the date and time are available, interested parties can visit worldtimebuddy.com to see when the chat will take place in their time zone.
Hey 118ers, my name is Lieutenant Commander Dassa Alexander-Dalton. We've been fortunate to add several new officers to our ranks since January and have seen some familiar faces return. Please give a warm welcome to new members: Romyana Casparian, 118 Ops. Kudon, 118 Ops. Ikara Gel, 118 Ops. Tobias Stager, 118 Ops. Luthus, 118 Ops. And to the Atlantis, Sarah Biorge, Jacques Lazer, Stefan Matheu, and Leffy. New arrivals on the Constitution B included Eston Aries and Chip Foley. The Gorkon received Mike Jalon and Joshua Sutton. The Jinu received several officers, including Noah Tanessa Levinson, Tyrone Peters, John Hankow, Eric Tierney, Martin Oliver, Haley Caden, and Kenneth Nakata. To the Thor were Sirach, Aleth, Tara Wilkins. To the Veritas, Jericho Alari, Mekhill Prime, Ishrani Qual, Noah Glover, and Gervais Mathael also joined us. Returners included Yokon Yalu to the USS Atlantis, Thalas Thakoro, also to the USS Atlantis. Maxwell Trainer returned to the Constitution B. Pholin Duyzer returned to the USS Gorkon. Paul Sleaford returned to the USS Gorkon. Ferrier Kian to the Juno. Wes Greaves to the USS Thor. Dar Alondra also to the USS Thor. And Ket Shoba. Remember to congratulate both our new members and our returners.
There's rain in the air and bog on the ground, and I'm being charged by the word, and that can only mean one thing, race fans. It's time for the Ferenginar Invitational 500, brought to you by the Grand Negist and Sluggo Cola. The sluggiest Sluggo Cola. Before we get into the particulars of the race, folks, let's meet our new racers. First, hailing from the restrained little town of Kyrie is the Vulcan Valkyrie, the Doc with the Rocks, Lieutenant Junior Grey to Leith. As she takes a moment to ignore the crowd completely, we'll meet her competitor, and many would say the reason we're here today. He may have started as second lieutenant, but he'll always be first in our hearts. Hailing all the way from humanity's heartland, it's First Lieutenant Wes Greaves of the Starfleet Marine Corps. Both racers are in close discussions with their pit crews, and last-minute modifications are being made to the racing craft. In the pits for Team Logic, we've got Chief Sirach, also a Vulcan, and just as outrageously emotional as his countrymen. Settle down, you two! There seems to be some small arguments in the pits of Team Marine, but from the booth here I can see the safety covers being closed and both races mounting their vehicles. As the rain pours down and the excitement heats up, just a quick reminder that today's race is sponsored by a generous grant from the Grand Negus ROM Maybe Do Some Stuff for Free Fund. That sure is one Grand Negus, ladies and gentlemen. Let's go down to the track for more. We turn away now from the world of sports and towards the world of science with our next in his series of fascinating pieces, Laser Focus with Lazarus Davis. Absolutely love him here on the podcast team. Think he's a great contributor and he's got a lot to say. So give him a good solid listen. Let's throw it over to Laz.
I've been thinking about a topic for a while now, trying to decide what interested me. My head pulled me in one direction, my heart another. But then I had a feeling in my gut. It's time to talk about embodied cognition. So, as an infamous French philosopher once said, Je pense donc je suis, which was translated into Latin as cogito ergo sum, and perhaps most recognizable as I think, therefore I am. So Descartes was the catalyst of the so-called brain-in-a-jar conceptualization of cognition, claiming that the brain is not only necessary, but sufficient for explaining cognition. However, this does not bear out in the real world. For example, did you know that the gut, your stomach and intestines, have the second largest concentration of neurons in the body? And even weirder, your gut can tell your brain what you're hungry for. You don't decide what you're hungry for, that's your gut. And even weirder is that your gut biome, the friendly bacteria that reside in our guts, can tell your gut what it's hungry for. So in other words, bacteria control your cravings for cheeseburgers. But let's backtrack. What does it mean to think? So to think is to respond to stimuli in the environment. Perhaps even more generally, just stimuli in general, because we can all think about topics that aren't present. You can think about a tiger without being in the presence of a tiger, for example. It's hard to imagine someone responding to the idea of a tiger having never encountered the idea of a tiger before. However, is thinking real? Well, I mean, I think, therefore I am. It's pretty safe to say that thinking occurs. I hope I don't need to convince you of that, dear listener. But nonetheless, it's real. And what I mean by that is that cognition is a product of us as organisms. And because we're organisms, we are a series of atoms and subatomic particles and molecules and compounds and chemicals and systems and so forth that all abide by the rules of physical reality. So, thinking is somehow an emergent property of our particular organization of atoms. Isn't that weird? But at any rate, it happens. Thinking happens. It happens in the real world. And so, let's get back to the point here of embodied cognition. It's so much more complex than your gut biome telling you to eat a cheeseburger. Because surely you've experienced a reflexive response. Typically something like some kind of perceived threat in the environment. Like that time you caught a baseball that was flying towards your head and you didn't really realize that you caught it until it was already in your hand. That was a reflex. So reflex responses like that occur faster than the brain can receive, process, and respond to stimuli. We know how long it takes, for example, for information entering your eyes to be processed by your mind, and then your mind to enact its motor systems to then send a message out to the musculature in your arm to grab the baseball. But let's get even more fine-grained than that. If you just hold your hand up, you might deflect a ball, but catching a ball is something entirely different. If you're too slow to grasp, the ball will bounce away. You don't catch it. And yet we can catch things, and it requires an effectively instantaneous response, far, far faster than our minds can think. So what's going on there? Well, it's the nearby nerves. Nerves exist throughout our body, and nerves are neurons. That's it. They are able to respond to stimuli without ever interacting with our brains. Neat. So your hand, in a very real way, thinks. Furthermore, our perceptual systems do a lot of pre-processing of the information sent to the brain too. Remember the rods and cones in your eyes that detect light, or luminance I should say, and color, are connected certainly to your brain, but the way they are connected to your brain is through nerves, which again means neurons. And those neurons do a lot of filtering before any information is sent to the brain. So in a very literal sense, much like your hands think, your eyes think, your ears think. This might sound absolutely bonkers to you, but let me put it this way, and I think you'll see my point. Try to imagine a color you've never seen. If we are truly brains in a jar, we should be able to do it, unimpeded by the limits imposed on us by perception. But because our perceptual system is incapable of rendering a new color, we cannot imagine it. That's because our cognition depends on our perceptual systems, and our whole body is a perceptual system of some type. If you were to change the organism's physical form and perceptual capabilities, you would fundamentally change its cognition from that point forward. Wild stuff. Things are so much more complicated than they may seem. Is the brain important? Absolutely. Do you need a brain for cognition? No, not necessarily, because you can respond to stimuli without a brain. But is the brain the seat of a lot of the higher functions that we associate with sentient life? Absolutely. But that doesn't mean that we should completely elide the important contributions that all of our peripheral systems, our peripheral nervous system, contributes to cognition. So anyway, have a seat or stand or do all kinds of embodied things as you think about this, and I'll catch you next time on Laser Focused with Lazarus.
Thank you, Laz, once again for another fascinating entry in Laser Focused with Laz. I am certain Spock raises an eyebrow to you. Now, we're going to go back over to our friend Sheila Bailey, who's got some notes on promotions from around the fleet. Then we're going to meet a new member in our interview starring German Galven and Romyana Casparian.
Hey 118, my name is Sheila Bailey, and I'll be going over some recent promotions within the fleet. So without further ado, we would like to congratulate all those for their hard work and dedication pay off. On the Eagle, which has now become the Juno, we have Quentin Collins, who went from Lieutenant to Lieutenant Commander. Artemis Stennis, who went from Ensign to Lieutenant JG. Galven Kinner, who went from Ensign to Lieutenant JG. And Rydal Shane, who went from Lieutenant Commander to Commander. On the Gorkin, we have Locksley, who went from Ensign to Lieutenant JG. Corliss Fortune, who went from Lieutenant JG to Lieutenant. And Samari Nevler, who went from Lieutenant to Lieutenant Commander. And last but not least, we have on the Veritas, Will Eukinix, who went from Lieutenant to Lieutenant Commander. Please be sure to congratulate these members when you see them around the forums and the chat rooms. Thank you!
Hey Starbase 118 members of the fleet, my name is Lieutenant Commander German Galven. We have a very special interview with someone who just joined our group and has already been making a name for themselves. A human-Vulcan hybrid Ensign Romyana Casparian, an engineering officer of Starbase 118 Ops, or just Ops for short. This is a very unique opportunity to understand more about what it's like entering into the group, first impressions, and everything else in between. Thank you for agreeing to take a moment and allowing me to interview you. Could you tell us a little bit about yourself for our readers out there?
Hello, my name is Rebecca. I'm 34 years old and I'm from the Netherlands, though I now live and work in northern Germany. My hobbies are tending to the garden, writing, and salsa dancing.
Congratulations on just recently graduating from the academy. Could you explain for our listening audience what the process was like for you?
For me, the week of training was a very welcome way to learn about how this role-play group works, without being overwhelmed by too much information from the start. The training officers provided me with initial information on how to format the sims, how to set up my character, and they gave useful feedback, in a positive way, on my simming. Though I must say that the amazing community of the Starbase 118 roleplay group are what made the few days between registering and start of training an absolute joy for me. And they still make me enthusiastic to play every day. So, a big thank you to all of you for that.
Now, I have the honor and privilege of writing with you on Ops, and I am always impressed and intrigued whenever you post a sim because you're a very talented writer. Do you take any inspiration from any books, film, TV shows that helps you imagine what it's like being a Starfleet officer?
Thank you for the compliment. Actually, I take inspiration from everything I encounter. Books, some films, and even paintings or music. For the Star Trek universe part of my writing, I fall back on TV episodes of The Next Generation and Deep Space Nine. And of course, the Starbase 118 wiki page, which is a treasure trove of information. I'm fascinated by people's behavior, so mannerisms and conversations are drawn from my own observations of how people in real life interact with each other. The biggest source, I think, is my experiences from my job, where I'm lucky to work closely together with people from different nationalities. And I always imagine that for a Starfleet officer, meeting and working with alien people and cultures is actually very similar to us meeting people from around the world as we do now.
You've been with the fleet for 2 months, and I've already been in a number of memorable sims with you. Are there any scenes that stand out from the rest for you that's stuck in your memory?
Oh, that's a tricky question. You're asking me to choose. To be honest, I take quite some time to write my sims and to make my responses to the tags just the way I want them. So I like them all. But if I really have to name one, it would be a scene where Romyana is on shore leave and by chance meets her boss, the Chief of Engineering, for the very first time. Now, as a writer, I make the mistake of not introducing them to each other properly and made her talk almost like they were friends. Finding out this mistake, I wanted to redo the sim, though the other writer had already posted responses, but in such a way that my mistake could actually be solved in character. So I did that and made it part of Romyana's backstory now. And even today, she still refers to the embarrassing moment. And as a writer, I learned a valuable lesson. Simming is very much a team effort.
Casparian has a unique quality to herself that's her hybridity, which is 3/4 human and 1/4 Vulcan. What made you decide to use it for her, and has it helped with character development?
I think it has helped me to be creative with my character without being drowned in possibilities. You know, I'm only a beginner in roleplay, so I didn't want to make things too difficult for myself at first. So the basis had to be something solid, something I was familiar with. So human. Then, in order to be able to let her grow, the 1/4 Vulcan allows me to put in little traits in her personality and some backstory surprises. Hopefully, this keeps Romyana an interesting character for me to play with and for others to sim with.
On your wiki, it says for her personality that once her trust is lost, it is not regained. There is a popular quote from famous Irish playwright Oscar Wilde that says, "Life imitates art far more than art imitates life." Has certain circumstances in your own life lead into your own writing?
Yes, I do use my own life experiences as a start of an idea, which I then incorporate into the running storyline. Though it then takes its own direction, making it a unique event with a different outcome than it had in my own life. I enjoy experimenting like this, and it is why I like to roleplay. So trust is a good example of that. It is a complex subject, paired with heavy emotions. I felt it's an interesting part of my character's personality to explore and develop as she matures in the game. That's why I put in such a bold statement. Now, let's see where it takes us.
And lastly, what kind of advice do you have for people who are thinking about joining, and for those who feel they struggle through writer's block?
For those thinking about joining, join. Then see if you like it. If any time you decide this group or game is not for you, then no hard feelings. But if you don't give it a good try, you will never know. There's nothing to lose, just give it a try. And for those struggling with writer's block, well, it varies per person. What usually works for me is to take a break, close the document, and go and do something completely different for a while. This way I'm not thinking about the sim at all. Then come back to it after an hour, or sometimes after a good night's sleep, and then I try again. And also remember that not every sim has to be perfect. As long as you have fun writing and being part of the community, that's what counts.
Thank you for your time, Ensign. You can read more about Ensign Casparian on the wiki, and if you liked what you heard today, please take a look at our website at starbase118.net, and you can join us today. Learn more, create your character, and apply.
I don't know about you folks, but I find it a genuine pleasure getting to meet new members from around the fleet, so I really appreciate that update, German. Thank you for getting that in. Now, we're going to go over to Science Officer Lorian Lovar, who's going to give us an update on the weather, before we jump over to a Wiki Roundtable discussion featuring Lazarus Davis, James Colquhoun, and Sky Blake.
Welcome to the Lorian Weather Report. I'm here on the desert planet of Janus 6, and boy, let me tell ya, it is hot. That's today's weather report. Back to you at...
That's not really enough for a weather report, Lorian.
Listen, Debak, I don't pay you to question my reporting.
Sir, I'm here on an internship program. You don't pay me at all.
Oh, right. Let's just start where I left off.
Agreed.
That's today's weather report. Back to you at the studio.
Hello and welcome, dear listeners, to our segment where we interview members of the Wikipedia team. I am one of your hosts. I am Josh. I play Lieutenant Junior Grade Lazarus Davis on the USS Constitution. And my co-host here is Dustin. Want to introduce yourself, Dustin?
Yeah, sure. I'm Dustin. I play Lieutenant Junior Grade James Colquhoun on the USS Gorgon.
And our guests with the Wikipedia team, please introduce yourselves.
And my name's Rich. I play Fleet Captain Roshanara Rahman of the USS Veritas.
My name's Dn't, and I play Lieutenant Commander Sky Blake from the USS Veritas.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for joining us in our transcontinental interview. This is so much fun.
Trans-Pacific, I think.
Oh, even better. So, Dustin has worked on some questions. I have helped a tiny bit. I don't want to steal his thunder. So, Dustin, why don't you ask the first question here?
Sure. So we'll start off with kind of a softball question here, especially because I'm sure most of our members are pretty familiar with the Wiki by now. But why not go ahead and give us a brief overview of what the Wiki is and how we use it at Starbase 118?
I will throw that question immediately over to our Chief of Wiki Operations. Is that your title that you've reclaimed recently?
Yes. So if you don't know, I'm trying to remember now. I've been in the fleet too long. Believe it or not, I'm recording this on Thursday, and tomorrow marks
11 years.
10 years. 10th anniversary.
10?
Hey,
I'm
congratulations.
I'm so sorry.
I know, that's crazy.
Did they give you a free pip for that?
They do. You do get recognition, so the awards are coming up, but that's a whole different thing. Anyway.
Okay.
So I joined in 2010, and then the the 118 Wiki, which is similar to the Wikipedia, is a little bit older. 2004 is when it started, and I'm sure most of you are familiar with it. It's basically our encyclopedia that has all of our lore. You can go to our main website. That'll have basic introduction of our group and all that. But in terms of the actual, I guess the way to think of it is if you think of like a traditional tabletop RPG, and you've got those great player guides and all those beautiful stats about characters and locations, all that. That's what our wiki is. And I don't know about you guys, but certainly that was one thing when I was first, as a prospective member, I saw the wiki and I was like, wow, there's this whole universe that these Trekkies have been building since 1994. And it was definitely, and it's fun because on the wiki, you can go back and look at any page's history, right? So if you go back and load those pages from 2004 or 2010.
Oh, gosh.
Don't
go back and load those pages from 2004 or 2010. Speaking as someone who was here, in 2011, we've improved.
Exactly. We've grown a lot.
Things get modernized, and you have different tastes over the years, and.
But I will say, and I think that's what will be part of this discussion, is obviously as things have modernized, they've also definitely gotten a lot more complex. Part of why I got the Chief of Wiki Operations title, it was kind of a recognition of all the work and templates that I've created over the years. So if you see a template, you might notice, like, I'll have a little especially if you go, a lot of people don't realize, this might be a handy tip to start out with. If there's any template, you can always go to the template page itself. So for example, let's say the sidebar. A lot of people use character sidebars, right? If you just go to the page template : sidebar, you'll find actually full instructions about how to use it. So
that's like all one word, right?
Yes, template and then the colon and then sidebar. And any template you can think of, the roster, for example, template : roster. And you'll find the full instruction. So that's my first wiki tip of the day.
Yeah, they're wonderfully annotated. I found that to be extremely helpful in building out my profile. Not that mine's particularly compelling or using the depth of possibilities of the wiki, but yeah, that annotation made it very approachable as someone who I don't really know much about the how to write in wiki. I mean, there's not a lot of coding, but there's a little bit of coding,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'll also go ahead and interject another little tip. There is you can create your own templates too. So, for example, one of the things that I've done is created James's sidebar. So if I create more pages for James, I can just load that sidebar up.
Oh.
You have been listening to the segment Wiki Roundtable. For a full recording, please watch our YouTube channel in the coming months.
I always find it incredible to hear about the behind-the-scenes effort that goes into maintaining the resources that we use as a fleet, and some of the silent heroes that are doing the work every single day just so we have this incredible place to call a community, to call a fun game that we can all play together. Thank you so much for all the work that you do, Wiki team. We appreciate it. We're now going to throw it over to German Galven once again, who's going to pop into the captain's corner with Captain Aaron Kells of the USS Thor. After that, we're going to have our first writing contest entry read from Jeff Teller, myself, and Dassa Alexander-Dalton, who will be reading my winning sim entry, Lullaby, followed by Time to Move On, originally written by Pholin Duyzer, read by James Colquhoun and German Galven.
Greetings, Starbase 118. My name is Lieutenant Commander German Galven, and we have a very special interview with someone who has been a catalyst for the fleet for a very long time. Fleet Captain Aaron Kells just took command of the USS Thor that launched recently from the Embassy of Tyrannus 2. Thank you for agreeing to take a moment and be interviewed. Could you tell us a little bit about yourself for our listeners out there?
Hello, my name is Tony, which I use primarily in part because I've used half a dozen or more characters as primary characters since I first joined the Starbase 118 fleet back in 2005, 15 years ago now. Aaron Kells is probably the character I've simmed for most often if you were to look at total time span I've spent with each of my characters, which is one of the reasons I chose him for command this time, which I'm going to talk a little bit more about later. A fun fact about me is that I joined Starbase 118 when I was still in high school, and I've just recently finished my PhD, so the group has seen me through my entire higher education journey, and 15 years really feels like 15 years when you're talking about the difference between high school and finishing grad school.
You just recently took command of the USS Thor. With your previous command service record, has it been a smooth transition process?
So the transition process has been pretty smooth. My first regular command in the fleet was of the Mercury. That was almost 8 years ago at this point, and that was definitely a more difficult situation. The original CO, the one who had actually launched that ship, retired only 4 months after the launch, and his replacement lasted about a week. So I was coming into certainly less than an ideal situation after that second new CO had to take an emergency long-term leave of absence. The Mercury's XO was really awesome through all of that. He was a great help to me. He really helped keep the group together. When I came on as the new CO for the Mercury, he was really instrumental in making sure that I had what I needed and in being a point of continuity for those folks who were continuing to write through that transition period. I knew when I found out what a force Brian had been, who's playing Lieutenant Commander Teller on the Thor and the Embassy, he'd really been holding things together in the same way as that XO I had on the Mercury. And that was really an important thing for me, to know that there was someone who was kind of taking charge and had been someone who folks look to as an authority figure during the transition period. I have found, both through my experience and from witnessing the experiences of others, that when you have multiple folks from a command staff taking LOAs or retiring or just leaving the command of a ship, then you tend to have a lot more folks who fall away from that ship as a transition to a new command staff is actually happening. So in this case, the staff has been really, really helpful and has served as an anchoring point for the Thor crew, I think.
With such a decorated service record, where and what kind of places do you turn to with that kind of dedication and contribution to 118?
So I like Star Trek a lot, shockingly, I know, because I'm doing this thing. That's definitely part of my persistence, both in Starbase 118 and just being a Star Trek fan. It's a really rich universe. There are always more stories to tell in that universe. But I am generally a fan of science fiction and fantasy, which I just abbreviate as SFF a lot of the time. I also co-host a podcast called The Imaginaries that is about to have its 4th anniversary. We look at contemporary science fiction and fantasy from a queer perspective as a part of The Imaginaries. So obviously I kind of have to plug that. If you want to check us out, you can go to imaginaries.net or look us up wherever you find your podcasts, whether that's iTunes, SoundCloud, Stitcher, Spotify, YouTube. Some of our back episodes are on YouTube, but basically wherever you look, you can look for The Imaginaries and find us. Which is to say, I have a lot of opinions when it comes to contemporary science fiction and fantasy, so rather than going through them all here, I will direct you to The Imaginaries, where you can listen to a lot of my opinions.
You have been listening to an interview with Aaron Kells, captain of the USS Thor. For the full segment, please watch our YouTube channel in the coming months.
Snapping awake with a painful groan, Lieutenant Commander Geoffrey Teller tried to reorient himself inside the darkened runabout. With no internal illumination and only faint starlight filtering through the viewports, the scene slowly resolved as he tried, and failed, to stand. The runabout's emergency restraints had engaged at some point, and he realized as a loose pad drifted past in 0G and clattered against a dead console were the only things keeping him from floating freely around the cabin. Something had gone terribly wrong. With a deep breath of air that was already tasting stale, Jeff tried to clear his throat, but ended up setting off a series of racking coughs. Report! Tomlinson! Jashawn! His words came out as a rasp, and elicited no answer. After a few moments it became clear why. Both officers, strapped to their chairs and still at their stations, weren't moving. From where he was, Teller couldn't tell if they were unconscious or something worse.
Oh, Geoffrey, did you hurt yourself playing again?
A woman's warm, lilting voice seemed to fill the cabin. Teller's eyes went wide as they focused on the impossible sight on the view screen. Too shocked to be afraid and too confused for anything cogent, he only managed to croak out a single word. Mom? For a moment, He was again 7 years old, having skinned his knee after failing to climb the large oak tree near their home. It had been a childish bet with his older sister, whose longer limbs and superior coordination meant she had been climbing the tree successfully for several years already. Never one to back down from a challenge, even at that age, Geoff had made it halfway up before losing his grip and sliding back down, painfully scraping his skin. His mother had been watching the proceedings from a nearby picnic blanket, and had rushed over with kind words and a small civilian dermal regenerator. That had been more than 20 years ago, before he joined Starfleet, and before his parents had been lost. Somehow, that thought helped ground his thinking. The face on the screen remained placid and calm, the picture of maternal compassion. But you died years ago. Your ship was... He was cut off by a very familiar and very maternal clucking.
Oh, don't worry about that, Geoffrey.
The voice and the face were perfect. Every inflection, every mannerism, even the way she brushed her hair to one side were exactly as his mother, June, had behaved.
I'm here now. Don't worry. Everything is going to be all right.
Teller felt himself slump back in the runabout's chairs as globes of moisture floated away from his eyes. Nothing about this made sense, and in the back of his mind, Geoff began giving serious consideration to the possibility that he was critically injured, and just imagining the whole thing. He tried to turn his attention back to the inert console in front of him. There had to be a way to get some power back on. After several failed attempts to bring systems online, Teller thumped his fist against the uncaring composite as the voice gently chided him.
Geoffrey, what did I tell you about letting your frustrations distract you?
His mother had crossed her arms and pursed her lips. She was clearly expecting him to respond. You're not real. You're not real. This is just some kind of weird brain injury. I need to get back to the ship. Teller tried to ignore the voice as he struggled with the seat restraints.
Oh, Geoffrey, I wouldn't do.
The warning came a moment too late as he successfully released the restraints and was nearly catapulted into the ceiling. He flailed without purchase for a few moments before colliding with the roof of the cabin.
That. You have been listening to Lullaby by Geoffrey Teller. Please watch our YouTube channel for the full recording coming out in the next few months. If you would like to read the contest entry, you can do so in the forums.
He hadn't been back to his childhood home in 6 years, Pholin realized as he was walking through the blossoming fields of Denobula. It had been the day before he had left for the academy when he'd met his parents to say goodbye. He remembered the looks on their faces when he told him he'd be leaving for good. So much had changed since then. I should never have left, he grumbled to himself, watching the gravel move underneath him. The planet's 3 suns had just appeared from behind the clouds, casting their dawn shadows on the path to the residence. The relationship with his parents had always been shaky, but that day had been particularly bleak. Even though he'd been planning it for months, he'd barely told his parents he was about to leave. They'd always wanted him to continue the family tradition, never leaving the planet as they'd done for over 90 years. When he broke that tradition, as a young and naive scientist, he'd scarred their relationship for life. On that day, he'd managed to disappoint them once more. Pholin had grown tired of life on Denobula, and wanted to explore the galaxy like he did when he was younger. And look how that turned out, he exclaimed into the emptiness around him. He'd missed the birth of his first grandson. He wasn't there when his wife's health declined, and he was thousands of light years away from Federation space when he had lost his mother and brother. Pholin felt like he'd turned into the person he hated most growing up. A person who was never there for his family, valuing his career more than his family. His father had been the captain of a submarine for over 50 years, exploring the vast depths of the Denobulan Sea. His mother was the biologist on board, and his brother would later study to become its helmsman. It was anything but a part-time job. Pholin's father especially would be away for months on end, leaving his children to grow alone with his wives. He'd always hated his father for that. Yet I ended up exactly like him, barked the Denobulan. Even though he'd never been close to his parents, Pholin shut down when he learned they had been in an accident on the submarine. His father, the captain, was the only one to escape the sinking ship alive. He lost his mother and his only brother. He'd just been promoted for the first time and started to dive into his work to deal with the pain. His career skyrocketed while he'd barely sought therapy. He had only opened up to a couple of friends, but he hadn't shed any tears. He was always tired, always grumpy. He spent more and more time alone, working in his science lab. It wasn't until the Columbia was decommissioned that he seriously started to question his future. He more or less forced himself to go to therapy and moved back to his home planet to serve as research coordinator at the Marathas Research Center. It was mostly a desk job, but it gave him some peace and quiet. Ah, there you are, he mumbled with a sense of nostalgia. He looked up to see his parents' home show up over the horizon at the end of the lengthy trail. Enjoying the sight of the place he had once called home, he couldn't help turning his frown upside down. It wasn't much more than a small cottage with white walls and a thatched roof. The Denobulan approached the house, which seemed particularly messy for an abandoned home. Usually, his mother would tidy up the house before going on a mission. They had left the house late last June before the accident, if he had recalled correctly. He walked up the steps of the porch, seeing they hadn't even bothered to clean up the dishes. A half-empty glass of Andor Lotak ale was still on the wooden table. Well, I didn't come here to clean up after them, he said with a smirk on his face. Continuing his journey back into his childhood memories, he entered the abandoned house. He turned on the lights in the hallway and took off his shoes. Just because he hadn't been back here in half a decade didn't mean he could forget his manners, he thought. To his left was a gold-rimmed mirror, showing Pholin's considerably fuller body. It had grown into a small problem recently, having to replace his entire wardrobe for a larger size. Below the mirror stood a tiny hallway cabinet, which prominently featured one of his favorite childhood pictures. It showed him and his mom on top of a nearby hill, which had taken him 3 hours to climb. Pholin had been 11 years old for just over a week when his father took that, and he had loved that picture ever since. It was just him and his mother hugging, their love so clear, nothing in their way. He missed her. A single tear managed to escape the Denobulan emotional defense system. He knew continuing to explore his home would only trigger more memories, but there was something inside him with a raging need for nostalgia. He wasn't quite sure why. Pholin opened the door to the living room. There were so many words he wanted to say, but not a single one escaped his mouth. "Pho, I've been waiting for you all day," she said, getting up and walking into the kitchen. "Would you like something to drink? The tea's hot already." He was left speechless, seeing his mom stand right in front of him with the classic Denobulan smile on her face. He blinked, but she was still there. "Oh, come on, don't be shy now." The woman approached him, seeing his worry, and went in for a hug. Pholin stood there frozen, unsure how to process what was going on. She smelled like his mom, she talked like his mom, and she hugged like his mom, although it had been a few decades since they'd hugged last. But this couldn't really be her, right?
You have been listening to Time to Move On by Pholin Duyzer, a writing contest entry. For the full segment, please watch our YouTube channel. It will be released in the coming months. In the meantime, if you would like to read the full contest entry, please visit the forums.
Man, I really enjoyed both of those. They ended up being absolutely moving pieces, and I don't just mean mine. Absolute congratulations to runner-up Pholin Duyzer, and I think you did a absolutely beautiful piece, and it was a still surprise to me to walk away with the win on this one when I write with such talented people from all over the fleet. All of that said, we are going to go over to a follow-up weather report from Science Officer Lovar. Apparently he's got a lot to say on the weather this week. Then we're going to get an update from Chloe Waters on the Excelsior program. Not the starship that you know and love, but a different starship you might come to know and love. And then our discussion about the red carpet fashion for this year's 2020 award ceremony.
Welcome back to the Lorian Weather Report. I'm still here on Janus 6 because my shuttle has failed to start. I think it's hotter, but my tricorder's overheated, so I can't really check. There's a breeze? Not a cool one, sadly, but... Debach went off searching for water a few hours ago, but I haven't seen him since. Hopefully he'll, Oh. That's a sandstorm. Back to you at the studio.
Space. The final frontier.
That's it. That's as fast as she'll go.
Distance of the wave.
10,000 kilometers and closing.
A gigantic sphere just appeared the moment we crossed into it.
And what's that glowing orb at the center?
It's a star, Captain.
We're inside a Dyson sphere.
This is Captain Nyota Uhura, calling the other starship Excelsior.
These are the voyages of the... Oh, who am I kidding?
Can't you see you just walked into a trap?
We use an ancient gateway to explore the farthest reaches of the galaxy.
Helm, all stop! Turn and
Too
fight!
late. Gateway transition in 3, 2, 1!
To defend yourself, for I shall feed.
Who then? Who killed you all?
The dark! Machines in the dark!
Machines in the dark. The Borg.
That's the secret my unit has been guarding, Cadet. Not another invasion, but the promise of one.
Our assignment is to find out what we can and come back alive. The rest is rhetoric.
The thing about saber rattling is that there's no good way to stop it until somebody pulls a saber out.
We need the brave. We need the brilliant, or the Federation will fail.
So, history never forgets the name. Excelsior. Or the name Chekhov.
All hands, this is the captain.
2, 1.
Hit it!
Starship Excelsior, a Star Trek fan production at starshipexcelsior.com or anywhere good podcasts are found.
Hey, fellow 118ers, this is Lieutenant Commander Dassa Alexander-Dalton.
And Lieutenant Junior Grade Sheila Bailey.
And we're bringing you the highlights of the biggest night of the year. The Red Carpet Awards. So we're going to start off with some of the trends that we saw last year. See how that compares to what we've got this year.
Last year saw the fleet coming together to celebrate the biggest night of the year, the award ceremony. On the red carpet, many of the finest wore dresses to casual attire, all representing the diverse cultures that each and every one of our fine officers come from.
Absolutely. We saw fashion designers like Keisha Mars, Bruno Blanchett, and Famna Zekits. I wonder what we can expect this year. Sheila?
Well, we can expect much the same, if not more. This year, one of the biggest new trends was officers wearing traditional attire.
That's right, Sheila. So let's jump to our first look. Pyraveo Shaqualnalir. That's a tough one to pronounce. I just love the form of this dress. It absolutely sets off. We've got the beautiful black with red. It's just so fashion forward, just really pops.
Definitely. And of course, that red and black was the perfect choice for that blue skin.
Alright, our next look, as you mentioned, is a little more traditional. We see Aleph in what we presume to be a traditional Vulcan garb. That beautiful red of that vest against the starch white of that shirt just really makes her skin tone and her hair color just pop. And of course, we see that beautiful brooch, that little red gem inside. It's the infinite diversity and infinite combinations symbol, I believe, and it just really beautifully sets off this outfit.
Next, we have Kells, and he, this wonderful Andorian, takes a perfectly ordinary Terran suit and jazzes it up. I love how he adds that umbrella, and all the colors perfectly go with the blue and white hair.
Exactly, Sheila. This is not something that you would expect to see an Andorian walking down the red carpet in. I can guarantee you that this Andorian drew some eyes with this wonderful traditional Terran outfit.
Alright, and next we have Sn't, and he is wearing something we definitely did not see last year. He is wearing a traditional Roman toga, which perfectly complements his background. And of course, the white of said toga is crisp and clean.
Exactly. It gives us more of I think we're seeing a lot more of traditional roots in this year's awards outfits. Just people really bringing out their traditional backgrounds.
Of course. It's something we very much love to see. And last but certainly not least, we have Issa, and she is wearing a lovely floor-length red dress that flares at the bottom.
I know, and look at that beautiful gold against that red. Just the pattern of it, the vines, it's just so beautiful against that red. Really makes that red color pop and come out. And it's just so beautiful against her skin tone.
Of course, the most important thing is these looks aren't all the red carpet has to offer. We see a large variety of officers from all walks of life, all backgrounds, showing off the best the fleet has to offer.
Alright, so that wraps up our short look. Stay tuned for after the Fleet Awards for a full segment on some of the looks that we saw this year. See you around the fleet, fellow 118ers.
Thank you so much, ladies, and thank you to all of our contributors to this year's gigantic 2020 Awards Spectacular podcast. It has been an absolute pleasure working with everybody on the podcast team and in the fleet as a whole. If you're an award winner this year, congratulations. If you put nominations in for your friends, congratulations to you too, because the people don't get recognized if those nominations aren't put in. Remember, nominations are now going to be open all year long, so when you see somebody out there in the fleet doing something awesome, you make sure to put that nomination form in right when it's top of your mind. Keep having fun out there on all your great starships and bases. Hope everybody's having a great time. Stay safe, stay healthy. This has been Jeff Teller for your Starbase 118 podcast.